Remember the 80s? Okay, I'm not talking about all that. I'm talking about the NHL in the 80s. Goals came in bunches, stats were just through the roof, and goalies, well, they were pretty much left out to dry. Look, I'm not saying we're going to see anything like that again. Let's face it, it was the highest scoring decade of all time, and the game has evolved since then. But lately, especially when I'm looking at box scores, I feel like maybe I should go get this haircut again. Yeah, that's me. So get your mullets ready, because here are 9 reasons why it kind of feels like the 80s in 90 seconds. Start the clock. The top 2 scorers in the NHL are not only on the same team, but they play in Edmonton. Now, that happened 3 times in the 80s, with Paul Coffey and Jari Kurri taking turns playing runner-up to the Great One. There's a legit shot that 4 players will score 50 goals this season. That hasn't happened in 14 years, but it did happen every single season in the 80s. Teams are averaging over 3 goals per game, which has only happened twice in the last 23 years. But it did happen every year in the 80s when teams averaged 3.7 goals per game. John Carlson, he's on pace to crack the 90-point barrier, and we haven't seen a blue liner do that since 1994. But in the 80s, these 3 players combined to do it 8 times. Only in the 80s could a goalie who allowed more goals than anyone in the league still win the Vezina. Now, Connor Hellebuyck is top 5 in that category, and he's in the Vezina conversation. The 80s saw a ridiculous average of 110 hat tricks per season. Now, this season is on pace for 80, with Alexander Ovechkin and David Pastrnak leading the way. Put it this way, Ovechkin actually had 3 in a span of 6 games. Remember seeing scores like this? Well, 54 games this year have seen a team score 7 or more goals, including 3 teams that put up a 9 spot. 24 current coaches or GMs played at least 1 game in the 80s. And finally, the 80s certainly had their share of mustaches. We gotta thank Austin for this one.